friends, this is Trish and welcome to Happy Holy Healthy Life. Today I want to talk about the signs and traits of toxic Christians. I'm sure most of us have had the experience of meeting somebody new or maybe joining a church group, and maybe things seem okay out the gate, but as things progress, there's kind of some red flags that start to pop up. But if you're anything like me and you want to think the best of people, it can be really easy to ignore those red flags. But I just want to tell you, if you don't take away anything from this video except for one thing, please never ignore red flags. For the purpose of this video, I just want to spend time describing things that I have personally seen and witnessed. And oddly enough, within the past few weeks, I've had 3 separate intense encounters with super toxic Christians. And I just want to help you out so that you can be in healthy, safe communities and healthy, safe relationships. So without further ado, let's get started. For most of these, I'm going to speak of one person, but this can definitely apply to whole entire groups. So number 1 is they put themselves on a spiritual pedestal. They try to establish a place of authority in your life. And a lot of times they try to establish themselves as maybe somebody that has a special teaching or revelation from God, or somebody that's called, anointed, appointed, and chosen by God himself. By doing this, they try to get you to believe that they have a special corner on truth that nobody else really has. It's very common for these people to have strong, charismatic personalities. They're often magnetic and likable, but you might notice kind of early on that they sort of have a scary side to them. This can oftentimes come out regarding how they talk about other people. And it really plants a subconscious seed that makes you want them to think well of you. Sometimes they might come across a little bit like a car salesman. Other times they might come across in a really parental, nurturing way, depending on their personality. But usually meeting them, there's going to be some kind of impact on you. If this person is in the context of a group, you might notice that this person and the group really talks a lot about honoring and obeying authority. And you might notice that a lot of people seem to look up to and follow this person. And they have what I like to call "we're the only one" syndrome, meaning that they are some kind of special group that is the only group that really has the truth, or the only ones that are really understanding what's going on in the world today. And they don't always come out and tell you this right away, but if you really look around and pay attention and listen to the language, these are all things you might notice pretty early on. The effect that this has on you, whether you realize it or not, is you start to look up to this person and look to this person for guidance, wisdom, and leadership. And as we'll learn about later, this is where they can really get sort of a foothold in your life and gain control over you. Number 2, they try to offer you something. Some people call this love bombing, but it can look like a variety of different things. They might try to make you feel special and chosen and smart and anointed. They might say something like, "Wow, I can really see that God has a huge call on your life. If you join this group, I could see you teaching in our ministry." They might just come right out the gates buttering you up. Or they might try to really hook you on their church or group or Bible study or mission and kind of make you feel like you're joining something that's way bigger than yourself and that's so special, elite, and exclusive. If it's more of a one-on-one situation, the thing that they might be offering you is wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Going back to number 1, oftentimes they're trying to get you to believe that they know something you don't, and if you stay in relationship with them, you'll understand things so much better. Sometimes if it's a person that's slightly older or in a ministry position, they'll come into your life and kind of act like they want to be a mentor or a parental figure to you. Or if they're more your age, they might try to come in as if they're trying to be your friend. But oftentimes you'll notice that they really aggressively contact you. Like they might send you messages every day, maybe multiple times a day. It's like they're really trying to insert themselves into your life. Just a word to the wise. That's why it's really important to not be in a place of loneliness or desperation in your own life, because that can really make you vulnerable to people that are actually looking for people that are lonely. I know it's kind of hard to hear that, but it's just kind of true. Now, number 3 is where you might start to notice things go south. They have sometimes really toxic one-way communication. So you might notice that they are relatively nice and pleasant as long as you agree with them. But people like this do not like to be questioned. Maybe at first they'll tolerate it and say, oh, I totally understand where you're coming from, or I can tell you're really a great thinker, kind of more of that love bombing. But you're going to start to see anger and irritation if you question them, and you might see kind of sparks of rage if you outright disagree with them. Because they've already established this exclusivity, and you've probably already heard them have a lot of us and them language, when you start to question or disagree, they're going to put you more so in the them category. So just to give you a little bit of an example, one of the recent strange situations that I was in was there was a particular person that was trying to get me to join their group, and they sincerely believed that their mentor was the only person in the world that had gotten a certain revelation. Typically for me, that's a red flag right there. But this person was really sure to emphasize that the entire church is asleep right now, that nobody is awake. They made it a point to mention to me that they had reached out to 50,000 pastors and that nobody was responding. But to them, this was confirmation that the whole church is asleep. So there's also a lot of circular reasoning. The way they think is, I have the truth, everybody else is wrong. If you agree with me, then you can be on the side of the truth. If you question or disagree, that proves that you're asleep. And you'll find with this kind of one-way communication, there's not a conversation of equals. They're very much trying to disseminate information to you and get you to believe something, and they're not entirely interested in a conversation or a process. You'll also notice that they can be very impatient. When they start to see that maybe you're not going to drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak, you're going to notice an automatic cooling off of all of the former niceness, friendliness, and interest. If they have successfully hooked you into either wanting to be their friend or wanting to be accepted by them, wanting to be in their group, you're either consciously or subconsciously going to realize that, and you're going to stop questioning them and stop disagreeing with them because you want to continue to feel those affirming, accepting feelings. But let's say you make it past the circular reasoning and the us and them talk, and you continue to say, you know what, I really don't agree. I really don't see it that way. That's when the mask is going to come completely off. They will likely tell you that you don't really love God. You don't really love the truth. Those are the exact words of somebody that I just dealt with in this weird scenario. They're going to straight out tell you, oh, well, you don't really believe God, or I can tell you're really having struggles with unbelief. I'll pray for you. They'll be like very condescending if their personality is coming across more as like, oh, I'm the loving kind of parental mentor, or they might straight out just call you names and attack you. And this is where how you respond will show a lot about the situation and about who they really are. Typically, I try to have a lot of grace for people, and if they have weird communication patterns, I have actually made the mistake of writing those things off, ignoring those red flags, and just saying, oh, maybe they're kind of socially awkward and don't realize they're being rude. And a lot of times I'll just kind of talk around it and ignore it. But I would suggest that you don't do that. Address it. Say, you know what? When you said that I don't really know or love the truth, I found that really insulting. And it's like, hello, of course that would be insulting. But in the very, very, very off chance that they are just like socially awkward, what you should see is them apologize and them stop that kind of talk completely. But 9.9 out of 10 times, if you're dealing with somebody that's like narcissistic and toxic and even spiritually abusive, they're going to gaslight you. They're going to say that you don't understand what they meant, that that's not what they said, that you're the one with the problem, and the attacks will keep coming. That's how you can differentiate kind of what kind of person that you're dealing with. Some people genuinely have rough, abrasive personalities and might be worth, still being friendly towards, but some people that are toxic, the only thing to do is to completely cut them off because they're only going to get worse. And that's another thing that I've noticed that was like shocking to me in some of these recent weird encounters that I've had. Some of these people were not afraid to be this way really early on with me getting to know them. And I could just only imagine if I continued into any kind of relationship with these people, how bad would it get? You're also going to notice that these people are not humble. They're super prideful. They're not going to repent. They're not going to apologize. And they're not going to say they're wrong. And if you so completely obviously catch them in something, like for example, if you were sending messages to them and you literally quote them back what they said and say, no, actually you said these words, they're still going to find a way to maybe kind of acknowledge it, but then make an excuse for it. So these are all huge, huge, huge red flags. Going along with this is number 4. They really are motivating by fear and not love. The kind of relationships you want to be in and the kind of environments that you want to be in terms of your faith are ones that have grace and that they have freedom, which means that you have the freedom to believe what you believe and they have the freedom to believe what they believe. Obviously, if somebody thinks that they have the truth, they're going to tell that to you, and that's fine. And you're able to tell them, well, thank you for sharing. This is what I believe is true. And even if you don't disagree, there still's got to be some kind of level of freedom. And people have to understand that everybody is on a journey, and depending on where they started from, it might take a while before everybody learns all of the facets of the faith. However, when you get into some kind of weird toxic community or like Christian relational situation, you'll know that it's toxic when they are trying to change you immediately. And there's no grace or process. They're just like, this is the truth. You need to believe it. And if you don't, this horrible thing is going to happen to you. Some people, going back to the original appeal to authority, will say like, oh, well, I'm God's anointed, and if you disobey me, you're disobeying God. Or since they're teaching their own weird little angle on the truth, they'll say, well, oh, if you don't believe this, then that shows that you just don't believe the Bible. And again, you can kind of say, well, actually, the Bible doesn't say that, but then they'll accuse you of being confused or blinded or being possessed or something crazy. They'll often take scripture way out of context. One of the people that I was dealing with recently took an Old Testament passage that talks about how God doesn't do anything without revealing it to the prophets to basically have a blanket free pass, I guess, to say that his leader is the prophet. And therefore, if I'm disagreeing with him, then I'm disagreeing with God's prophet. It was a super weird situation. But clearly that verse is taken way out of context. This person was also claiming like supernatural revelation on who the riders on the 4 horses in Revelation was, and they had like certain dates, and I don't want to get into all the weirdness because it was just weird, you guys, but they took another verse out of context where, basically Jesus is telling his disciples, I've told you everything ahead of time so that you won't stumble. But he took that out of context to basically say, oh, we know everything about prophecy. And if you try to say like, oh, well, we don't quite know who the rider on the red horse is yet. If somebody said that, then to him, that was evidence that they were not hearing from God, or that they weren't listening to God's prophet, or that they were asleep. So again, with a really annoying circular reasoning. I've mentioned this a little bit already, but one thing that I noticed with all 3 of the weird scenarios I've been in recently is they can have a tendency to have like a very accusatory, mocking spirit. They are very quick to say like, well, you don't really love God, or you're worshiping an idol, or just any number of really kind of like hurtful character and motivation attacks, because basically what that does is that deflects the spotlight off of them and it puts it on you, so that you're so busy trying to defend yourself and say like, no, that's not true about me, or that's not what I meant, that they can kind of try to get away scot-free. And as you can imagine, these environments are just very controlling, and there's a huge lack of freedom. It's basically agree with them or kind of get kicked out of either relationship with them or a group or anything like that. There's just a total lack of grace. Now, number 5 is really interesting. They typically have a group of people that follows them and reinforces their bad behavior. I went to kind of a strange Bible college back in the day that this was so prevalent. It was like the kind of unhealthy leadership was creating little clones of themselves everywhere that behaved just as bad as the leaders and sometimes worse. These kind of personalities have a tendency to just collect. I want to be gentle here, but be honest and say kind of weak-minded people that are just like yes men and yes women, and that will do 50 hours of unpaid volunteer work just to like sit in these people's shadows. And so typically this is almost like a force of protection around these unhealthy leaders, so that if you try to talk to other people, then they're almost going to do the leader's dirty work and kind of put you in your place, so to speak. Oftentimes times in these groups, they leverage the members to put pressure on anybody that tries to speak out or question or express any kind of doubts and concerns. And people that speak up are typically labeled as troublemakers. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll just get shunned by the group, but other times you will be like outright attacked, and in some really serious cases, even threatened. These people are very all or nothing, and not in a good way. So it's like either you 100% agree with them or you are 100% kicked out. Again, there's a huge lack of grace and freedom. I also noticed in some of these really unhealthy, toxic atmospheres, especially in some of the past churches I've been to, there is a huge double standard. They might teach one thing from the pulpit, but favorite members are allowed to get away with doing all of the things that they teach not to do from the pulpit. There's also a lot of spiritual abuse and spiritual manipulation in certain kind of churches that really emphasize like demons and spiritual warfare a lot. You might be accused of having a Jezebel spirit. It can get really weird and they can accuse you of being a witch and doing witchcraft. Or sometimes they might say, hey, Satan has brought this person that's trying to sow seeds of division in our midst to like destroy us. They'll just kind of create all of these crazy narratives and accuse you. And basically in their eyes, you're guilty until proven innocent. And the leader is the one that establishes basically that you're guilty, so everybody else follows. And finally, in the end, if you refuse to fall in line, you're going to be completely discarded. You'll be cut off, cut out, blocked, and nobody will be allowed to talk to you. So I know that that's kind of heavy, but it is way more common than most people realize. I hope you haven't had an experience like this, but these are just some kind of red flag signs and warnings that you really want to look out for. We don't want to be paranoid, and we want to be gracious ourselves. And like I mentioned earlier, realize like some people just have weird personalities that they need to, be gently told, this is how your communication is making me feel. But for people that just like will not change how they're talking, will not change their toxic ways, the only correct response is to run, flee, get far, far away from those kind of people. If you guys are interested in this topic, please let me know. I have stories for days because I feel like I've been in a lot of weird situations with like Christian groups, Christian schools, Bible studies, and even just one-on-one individual relationships. And since for the last couple of years, since I started doing like social media ministry on like TikTok and different YouTube channels, that's kind of opened the floodgates even more for all kind of interesting people to like contact me and try to become my friend. And I've just encountered really bizarre situations. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to use these experiences for good and hope that I can help somebody else. So thank you. If you've never subscribed, please do so. I would also love it if you could comment and like this video and let me know if you have any other topic ideas for the future. God bless you guys and have a great day.